Check, check. Okay, I think I'm on. Wow, is that really loud? Or is it just me? I know Chris is on it and adjusting it. Thank you so much. All good? Okay. Well, good evening to everybody. For some of you, I think I saw maybe last month when you were here, and nice to see you again. I'm honored to be back here at your church, and just want to maybe ask if you're willing to say so, what brought you here tonight, or what interest do you have in the topic? Tell me about that a little bit, if you would. The 10 warning signs. Why is that important to you? Yeah. Mm. Okay. Okay. So they've had, I don't know if you could hear, but they had two relatives, correct, in the family who passed away from Alzheimer's. So have seen it up close and personal. I want to know more about it, certainly. Anybody else? Why are warning signs important, I think, is really critical to ask oneself, too. I'll just say to start off here, why is it important to know the signs of COVID? The flu, anything really, right? We need to know what we're dealing with. We need to know it helps us understand how to respond, right? So we will be talking about that this evening. And also, I think what I like so much about this program is that it really introduces us to what we would call typical aging. What does typical aging look like? We all understand, I imagine, that our bodies age. Who's with me on that? Our bodies age, correct? Okay. Just making sure. Our brains age too. Our brains age too. So what does typical aging look like versus what could potentially be cause for concern? So we're going to look at the 10 common warning signs, but we'll also be understanding how we can approach having a conversation with somebody that we might be concerned about. Because that's really pretty daunting to think about on its own, isn't it? What do you do if you have concerns or see signs? Where do you go from there? So looking forward to it. Is this really loud? It sounds really loud to me. It's not? It's okay, great. Just in my own ear, maybe. I'm not used to a stage and speakers and a microphone, my goodness, but thank you, Chris. He's awesome. Okay, so we'll go ahead and, I think, dig in. And if I failed to say already, my name is Jody Wills, and I'm with the Alzheimer's Association, the Orange County chapter, and we are located in Irvine. If you're not aware, the Alzheimer's Association is a nationwide nonprofit. And all of our chapters offer the same programs, the same excellent free programs and services all across the United States. And we also have, and you'll hear me talking about it a little bit later, a toll-free number or a helpline that I always say, because it's true, I wish my family had known about when we went through vascular dementia with my mother. I did not know there was a helpline I could call in the middle of the night when there were some behavioral issues and she wasn't sleeping and Dad wasn't sleeping. So we'll make sure we share that with you as well, okay? But here's where we're headed over the next, let's say, 45 minutes. And I will leave some time for questions at the end. To do that, I always like to help the audience manage expectations. I'm probably going to skip a couple of the embedded videos, so don't be surprised. But want to be sure we have enough time for questions at the end, too. But we'll certainly have plenty of time to cover the content. So as I said, we're going to talk about typical age-related memory, thinking, or behavior changes, because during the last program, last month, we understand that memory loss, or excuse me, Alzheimer's is about more than memory. It's also about thinking and behavior. We'll also understand how to recognize common warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia. And just to clarify, too, anybody remember what the difference is between Alzheimer's and dementia? And if you weren't here last time, sure, go for it. Okay. Excellent. Dementia is the umbrella, right. I don't have prizes this evening. I should have brought my... You get the glory. There you go. Right, so dementia is really the umbrella term. It's a general term, and Alzheimer's is the most common type form cause of dementia. Accounts for about 60 to 80% of the cases, right? So we're going to look at those common warning signs. We'll also talk about tips for approaching somebody, as I shared earlier. We also want you to understand why is it important to detect the disease early? Why is that important? It is very, very critical. And what are the benefits of getting a diagnosis? And just kind of a quick look to it. What does a diagnosis, what does the process look like? What does one go through? What steps to be diagnosed with the disease? And possible tests and assessments are involved in that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'll also introduce you to some additional resources. To set the stage for this particular program, I'm going to introduce you to a family. Their last name is Garcia, okay? And let's start here. And you'll see why in a minute, why this sort of a frame story is helpful. So this is Mary. She's a 73-year-old widow, and she lives alone. She's a retired teacher who's always meticulously cared for her home. So keep that in mind about her, right? Her daughter, Lydia, has recently been noticing laundry pileup and junk mail and old newspapers lying around the house. So the first thing you might be thinking is, this is kind of new behavior that her daughters are noticing, right? She's usually been a meticulous housekeeper, but now they're noticing maybe a few things are one in particular right now is off, okay? Lydia here is the eldest of the two daughters. She lives just a few miles away and visits her mother frequently. And the other daughter, Patricia, lives in another state. She works long hours and isn't able to visit her mom as often as she'd like. But she communicates with Mary and Lydia frequently via phone and text messaging. So part of what we're going to see are some of those conversations so that you get a glimpse into what that situation looks like for a family, what types of questions are asked, and how we would answer them as well, okay? And here's an example. So one of the daughters is asking here, well, I'm worried about Mom. She keeps losing things, and the house is a mess, okay? Well, it's probably normal to get a little forgetful with age, right? Yeah, okay. But it's so unlike her. And here's the question then we ask ourselves, should we worry? Do we have cause for concern? Should we worry? Well, let's reach out to our old neighbor, Dr. Salloway, and he's going to explain a few important things here, okay? Oh, no. Did I do something?
Go ahead and keep that.
Okay, I'll keep it. No problem. We'll just hit rewind. No problem. Oh, he's going to switch. Look at him go. My goodness, I couldn't. I couldn't have set any of it up in the first place. So, but this again, it's really kind of a familiar conversation between two sisters, if you will, wondering about their mom. Okay. All right, and let's see. Any general questions? We'll use the time for that. Any general questions? I know it's a little early, but any questions? No? I will mention a couple of things that I did leave at the front desk, and I also have one or two items up here. This particular sheet, it's actually 2 pages. This is what we're going to be sort of looking at in this. It's all good. Thank you. In the second half, really, when we were talking about having the conversation. So if you didn't get one of those, be sure to grab one. And I've also got some 10 warning signs bookmarks I'll be passing out at the end that has all of the signs on them, too, to kind of keep it handy. Okay, thanks so much again, Chris. Here's the conversation. Mm-hmm.
Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want, right when they want it.
Right.
They have trouble remembering names. They don't think quite as quickly.
Thank you.
What's more concerning, what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, right. But more often, and begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
So as he mentioned, and he is a real doctor, by the way, he's certainly a part of the, let's call Dr. Salloway in our fictional frame, if you will, to the program this evening. but he's also a real doctor. So some of the things I think he mentioned are very critical because it's really takes, let me go ahead and move to the next one, great. Having trouble here. Anyway, we'll hear from him again. Here we go on to the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. It is important to remember too, I think I mentioned this last time, there's a phrase, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's. Anybody remember the second part? You've seen one case of Alzheimer's. That means where we're going to launch into next, I'm probably just going to play 2 of these, but understand that whereas one person might have trouble with speech, trouble remembering new words, trouble getting dressed, they might maybe do, you might see signs 1 and 4 in one individual, where another person, it might look very, very different, okay? So keep that in mind. It's not a one-size-fits-all, one formula fits all by any means. Let's go ahead and hear about why it's important to know the signs, okay?
Dementia is the umbrella term for the
There we go.
Oh
boy. Sorry.
possible causes of dementia.
There we go.
And Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
For sure, great.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So a little review there for you right on the topics of Alzheimer's and dementia. Now let's hear Ruth Drew talk about the importance of knowing the signs here, okay?
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things, but when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with. Some of the things that can look like Alzheimer's may be other treatable conditions. If it is Alzheimer's, you still want to know as early as possible, because that gives the person and the family time to plan, time to make decisions, and it also gives the person with the disease a voice and allows them to say what they want.
All very important reasons, absolutely. So it also enables one to live. Back up. Okay, thank you. He's giving me the thumbs up, thank you. It also enables one to remain independent longer, okay, independent longer, all right? All right, move it along here. So here are our 10 signs. Again, this is not really a one-size-fits-all, there's no formula. And it doesn't mean you have to have all 10. This does not mean you have to have all 10 to have Alzheimer's, okay? Or there's no order to them. These are just 10 of the most common warning signs that the association puts together to help people like us understand what to look for. All right, so memory loss that disrupts daily life, that's the first one. We'll take them one by one here. And what I like to do is start with kind of the typical aging example first, and then what could potentially be a cause for concern, okay? So anybody here, show of hands, ever forget a name or an appointment? We all, I know we're laughing because why? We all do that. That's typical aging. I like to say it's typical life, right? We all do that. So that in and of itself is not a problem, okay? What could be a problem, though, would be seeing that happen in yourself or others with more frequency. It can also take the form of, maybe asking the same question over and over, that repetition that tends to be a hallmark for the disease, and having to really increasingly rely on memory aids. Anybody familiar with the term MCI, or mild cognitive impairment? Have you heard that term before? That, by definition, is not significant enough to affect daily life. This is, so a memory loss at a level where it's disrupting daily life. Maybe it's affecting their getting dressed in the morning. It's affecting their finances, how they keep track of their finances, etc., okay? So memory loss that disrupts daily life, sign number 1. Number 2, challenges in planning or solving problems, okay? And what counts as planning can have a lot to do with, if you've heard the term executive function, that's when our brains are tasked with something like, it comes into play with cooking, for example. First you do this, first step, second step, third step, fourth step. This is an area, by the way, this is one of the signs that we noticed in my mother, who was a terrific cook and didn't have to use a recipe anymore. But we noticed she was having trouble moving through the what used to be very easy steps of cooking a particular dish. And we started to wonder, gee, that's not like Mom. So again, think of the frame story with Lydia, the mom, and she was always a very, very fussy housekeeper, but the daughters are noticing things that she didn't used to do. So keep that in mind too as we move forward. But in terms of challenges in planning or solving problems, it can also look like the individual having difficulty concentrating and kind of taking a lot longer to complete tasks. Again, this is something they didn't used to have trouble with, but you're seeing it relatively new, okay? So once again, making an occasional error in your checkbook, not an issue. If it's happening with some frequency, kind of with, over and over, and it's not something that you used to do, it might be something to flag and make notes of. And by the way, as you're considering some of the 10 signs and how they might relate to people, I'm doing it again, how they might relate to people that you care about, I would recommend that you take notes, that you keep notes somewhere. I always say, this is something my dad did very, very well. Every neurology appointment, once we got a formal diagnosis, saw a neurologist every 6 months or so. Because he had copious notes about the behavior, what time of day, what he was seeing, it also enables that professional, neurologist, physician, whoever it might be, to get a picture of the person outside of the office, what they're doing, what the person's seeing at home. So keep that in mind too. It can be incredibly valuable during the process of a diagnosis as well, okay? All right, so 2, challenges in planning or solving problems. I'm going to skip those embedded videos because I want to be sure we have time to cover the beef, okay? Number 3, difficulty completing familiar tasks. And this is really, number 3 here, all about whether or not someone is finishing what they started. One of the classics my mom used to do was go out, take the laundry out to the washing machine, and I can't tell you the number of times that my dad would find it sitting on the washing machine, never made it into the washer. So it was this intention, but by the time she got to it, it had gotten lost in the process. So thinking about typical age here, so anybody occasionally need help using, your microwave, maybe your cell phone, maybe an audio-visual system in your house or something of that nature. Anybody ever have to do that? It's not just me, right? Okay, these things are typical. This is typical aging and sometimes, again, typical life. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having trouble driving to a familiar location, that the person gets in the car and wants to go to get their hair cut where they've always gone for years, but sits in the driveway and can't complete that familiar task. That's an example. Organizing a grocery list. That grocery list also employs what's called executive function, that part of your brain that enables you to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Okay. And remembering the rules of a favorite game, if it was an individual who was an avid card player maybe, and all of a sudden they were having trouble understanding how to play the game, enjoying the process, again, might be a cause for concern. Not just that one thing, it's usually going to be more than one, so keep that in mind as well, okay? And number 4, confusion with time or place. What does this look like? Anybody ever go, oh, today's Wednesday. Oh, no, it's not. It's Tuesday. We all do that, right? Again, that's typical. That's typical aging, typical life, right? But usually, and as I just did in that example, you do what? Oh, no, it's Tuesday. We figure it out later, right? A person that may have early Alzheimer's would probably have trouble with that second part. They wouldn't be able to properly tell us what day of the week it was. They'd have to have somebody provide it, likely, okay? And you'll see something similar here momentarily with another sign, okay? But having trouble understanding something if it's not happening immediately can also fall into this category as a sign. There's a reason why, in terms of for caregivers of those with Alzheimer's disease, there's a reason why, too, we don't, or how can I say it, we always recommend that, because time is an abstract concept. Those concepts that are abstract like that can be difficult for a brain with Alzheimer's to grasp. So again, there are some reasons we do that, okay? So confusion with time or place, maybe somebody, my mom would do this too, ends up, in the kitchen but doesn't remember walking there, doesn't remember what they went there for either at times, okay? Let's take a look at number 5. Okay, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. I'm going to do a little demonstration here to tell you when I witnessed this, okay? Everybody see my water bottle? A typical problem with our eyes and age can be cataracts, as it tells us up on the screen, certainly. But that's not the kind of thing we're talking about here at all, okay? This has to do with being able to judge distance and the spatial relationships between items, okay? My mom and I were in a car. I was driving. She was in the front passenger seat. I think she had a cup of coffee in the center there, the coffee holder, right? And this is what I saw her do, and kind of out of the corner of my eye, I should say. But this is what I saw her do. So instead of, you and I would obviously grab the bottle, right? But that's what she did, kind of to the side of it. That's having an issue with spatial relationships and also judging distance. So that is one form it can take, certainly, okay? But it can also be the person having trouble reading, difficulty with balance, too. Sometimes falling, tripping. I know that's something we saw, too. That can come into play here and be a part of this particular warning sign. Again, it's going to be more than that we want to look at, not just the one sign, but keep in mind some of these more common ones, okay?
Alzheimer's disease.
All right. Number 6, new problems with words in speaking or writing. Does it say new? Pay attention to the word new, really, really important. I've mentioned this before. New problems with words in speaking or writing. So if the person has always been a good speaker, a good writer, and all of a sudden you're noticing some differences there, could that be a problem? It could. What if the person's always been kind of lousy at that? Is that going to cause alarm or concern? Maybe not, right? Because it's more common for them. It's how they used to be. It's not new, okay? So this can also be stopping in the middle of a conversation and having no idea how to continue. Again, sometimes that happens to us. We just lose our train of thought. That's not what we're talking about. This is going to be more common, more frequent, and such, okay? Struggling with vocabulary, instead of using a word like, the most common one I think is, instead of saying a watch, they might say something like an arm clock, or instead of a tie, a man's tie, they might say a rope or something of that nature, not using the right words, okay? Or maybe having trouble naming a familiar object, right, using the wrong name. We all have trouble finding the right words, right? But again, it's going to be more than that for it to cause concern for us, okay? It's got to rise to a different level and with greater frequency as well.
The other thing that
Okay. All right, 7, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. This was the one I said was coming. What does it say there? Does it just say misplacing things? No. It's more than that. Who's ever misplaced things? We all misplace things, right? But it's more than that. You and I typically will do this. We'll walk into, let's say, the office. I do this quite often. Forget what I went there for, right? What's the next thing you do? You go back where you came from. Instinctively, we do that. And then what? It occurs to you, and then you return to what you were doing, right? Continue on that path. Well, a person with Alzheimer's in early stage might well have difficulty with that second part, retracing their steps. So again, keep in mind, and sometimes I've heard sighs of relief when people hear this particular program. Oh my gosh, I thought it was me. No, it's normal, it's typical to, misplace things and, losing the ability to retrace steps. Misplacing things is the normal part. Losing the ability to retrace steps, that would be a potential cause for concern, okay? Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. This really can be a very sad one because this is where sometimes people take advantage of individuals with the disease, and that can be maybe giving large sums of money to telemarketers, okay? For you and I, every day, making a bad decision, making a mistake once in a while, forgetting to change the oil in the car, forgetting to, if people still balance their checkbook, I know some do, that is typical. That is not a cause for concern. But the other items up above, using poor judgment when dealing with money, as I said, with telemarketers or whatnot, paying attention to paying attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean, this can also be a really kind of a big sign, I guess you could say. It is such that it's an obvious sign, I guess you can say. Anybody ever witnessed that? Yeah, it can be a really tough one to deal with, and the dignity of the person too is so very important. So, decreased or poor judgment is our number 8. Number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. Well, we all at times may not feel like going out on the weekend, or it's Friday, we worked a long week, we've done a lot of chores, whatever it might be. I don't want to go out tonight, I want to stay in. That's typical, not a cause for concern. That hits us every now and then, right? What could be cause for concern, though, is something like this. I think of my father-in-law, who's an avid football fan, okay? All of a sudden decides he doesn't really want to watch football, doesn't want to go to a game, that might make me go, looks like withdrawing from his daily life or from his hobbies, from things that he once enjoyed, okay? Having trouble keeping up with a favorite team or activity, also an example that can fit here. So that's different than, again, occasionally realizing, I don't feel like going out with the family or whatnot, okay.
One of the most...
All right. And let's take number 10, changes in mood and personality. Again, you could read that and go, well, we all have changes in mood and personality. Not the type I'm going to tell you about. And that's really, they're going to be things like anger, they're going to be things like, impatience, and really not minimal, very significant changes in moods and behaviors, okay? Happening at times where they weren't happening. Each of us can we kind of like things done the way we want them done, right? We all are like that. That's okay. Again, that's typical too. But we're talking about becoming confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. There's some pretty serious emotions there, okay? And it's going to be pretty obvious and pretty significant and pretty frequent. Or maybe getting easily upset at home with friends or when they're out of their comfort zone. That can often be a real key too. When they're out of their comfort zone, that those emotions and those changes in mood and personality can really come about, okay? So any questions about those before we go on? There they are again. Any questions about those? Do you feel like you have a little better understanding of what typical aging looks like versus what could be a cause for concern as we move forward? Yeah? It's very quiet. Yeah? Okay. Okay. And here, please, if you know, notice, that's weird. If you notice any of these signs to any degree, either in yourself or someone else, please take action. And as we'll talk about here momentarily, when is the best time to take action? Sooner rather than later. The longer we wait, the disease continues to progress. But also another thing to keep in mind, and it's been touched on, I think, a couple of times, and that is, could it be something? Some of these signs you're seeing, they also mimic quite a lot of other conditions. Depression can look like memory loss. Mixed medications, some of the effects from mixed medications, hypothyroid. So another real reason why it's so critical to get a test, get to a doctor, and ask questions and find out what's going on. Because it could well be something that's not only manageable, but treatable. We'd hate to miss that opportunity too. So please keep that in mind. It could be something else entirely. but we'd want to know what it is. Okay. So the next focus here will be interpreting the signs and deciding next steps. So let's take a look at how their texting conversation for the Garcia family continues. Did you look at the warning signs info I sent? Well, I did, but still don't know. Mom's showing a couple of the signs, but not all of the time. So then again, that problematic question of how do we know if it's serious enough to see a doctor? Let's let Dr. Salloway speak to that again.
Memory is not all or none, especially when there are early symptoms or signs. So on a good day, people might function very well and not really, no one notices there's a memory problem. But on other days, especially if they're tired, then things become more noticeable. So memory is variable. It's not all or none. And then there are different type of symptoms that develop for each person. So some people may have trouble with language, may have trouble with organizing themselves, may have trouble navigating while driving, and other people don't have the same symptoms. So you don't have to have every symptom of Alzheimer's to be concerned. And I think the most important thing is determining what has changed from that person's normal level of functioning. And usually people have a pretty keen sense of, what they can normally do well. And then when either they or the family notice that there has been some change from that usual pattern of functioning, that should be a warning sign to people. But they don't have to check off all the boxes.
Okay. So what has changed from that person's normal level of functioning? That was the question that he posed, right? That's a good one to ask. What has changed here? Okay. What's different? What's new? Okay. All righty. So let's move forward. Okay. Now we will look at, we've got a recap here. Okay. Important to see a doctor, and I think we're going to talk about early detection here as we move forward. I will say friends and family are often the first to notice changes. It isn't very likely at all it's going to be the person themselves. It's going to be the people on the outside looking in that are going to be the first to notice the changes, okay?
It's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, and more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot, and the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it, and they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Very common to denial, that's very common. It's something my family went through too. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So let's talk about now, we've got some information about the 10 warning signs. Great, now we have maybe some concerns about someone, so what do we do with that information? Where do we go with that? So it's a bit of an application process here from the theory we just talked about. And we've got 10 steps that we can introduce you to here too. So step number 1, what changes in memory, thinking, or behavior do you see? And here I'm going to remind you too, if you're in this situation, I highly recommend that you take some notes. This sheet, again, I'll mention, is for that purpose. You can use this, if you do have concern for someone, you can use this sheet to make your notes, okay? So what types of changes are you seeing? And again, it's more than memory, thinking, behavior, okay? So you're assessing the situation. Step number 2, what else is going on? Well, that seems really simple, right? What does that mean? Think about this. I once had a person come up to me, it was at Fullerton Library during a class, or after a class, and she said, I'm really concerned about I think it was her dad, really concerned about Dad. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing, what's going on. And she went ahead. First thing she said was, well, we lost Mom last year, and what was I thinking? Grief, depression is potentially something to consider as well, okay? So what else is going on in the person's life? Maybe a loved one, they've lost a loved one. That can certainly affect each one of us very, very significantly. Maybe the kids have gone away to college and left a rather empty house. A lot of other things in life can be going on that are going to affect the person that you want to be thinking about and asking questions about. Learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. Again, that's why you're here. So very, very important. Okay? Has anyone else noticed the changes too? You might think about neighbors, grandchildren. Is it just me? We tend to ask ourselves. Well, probably not. Okay? Probably not. Have the conversation. Who should have the conversation to discuss these types of concerns? Any thoughts? Close friends, okay. I would say really whoever you think the loved one, this individual that you're concerned about is closest to, has a good rapport with, and would probably, have this type of conversation with in a relatively calm fashion, okay. In our family, it was me, my mother and I were alike, and so I was often the one appointed, if you will, or sometimes took the initiative to have conversations that might have been difficult, okay. Also important, too, let me back up one minute. When we talk about who, please remember, too, to keep in mind when you're talking about having the conversation, one person. We don't want to have a group of people there. That's going to be intimidating. I don't know about you, but I probably wouldn't respond well to that, right? It might be embarrassing. It could be really tough. So think about it. One-on-one is usually best and in a quiet atmosphere. Best time and place to have the conversation. Again, you know that person best. What we're trying to, I think, get everyone to do is think about what would be best for that person. It varies. There's not a right answer. Just be thinking about a comfortable spot, an enjoyable spot, something they like, and whether evening is best, whether afternoon is best. These are all things to think of. What will you or the person having the conversation say? Oh dear, that's probably the hardest one. Here's what I don't recommend. Mom, you've got Alzheimer's. Not usually the best approach, okay? Sometimes being direct, I was talking with someone earlier, sometimes being direct can be helpful. It tends to be with many people that there are trigger words, I might call, saying, you've got Alzheimer's, you've got dementia. For most of us, it would rattle us, right? So let's think about different ways to approach it. We might say, Mom, I've been noticed that you're doing a few things differently lately. The other day this happened. Has it happened any other time? Can you tell me about it? It's a whole lot different than going, you've got Alzheimer's, you've got memory loss, which, again, the conversation's going to shut down probably right there. And I think on the sheet here, too, the two-pager that I mentioned to you, I think there's also a really good, on number 7, what will you or the person having the conversation say? I've noticed this change in you, and I'm concerned. Have you noticed it? Are you worried? How have you been feeling lately? You haven't seemed like yourself. That's another good one, okay? I noticed you did this, and it worried me. Has anything else like that happened? Again, much more likely to meet with some success and even have a second conversation, perhaps, than if you said the other way, which I don't recommend, okay? All right. Offer to go with the person to the doctor. Absolutely. We don't want them going by themselves. And also, that's a great opportunity to share some of those notes you've taken. Again, that is a really important piece of the picture when you talk about behaviors. Maybe you notice your loved one is becoming aggravated or irritated in the afternoons. They might realize, oh my goodness, that sounds like what's called sundowning. That could be very, very helpful to them to know that's happening. So the more you can share with them, the more helpful it will become, okay? If needed, have multiple conversations, and I will say it probably will take more than one conversation. That's okay. Here's where I'm going to mention, too, you can call the association's toll-free helpline. It's the 800-272-3900. It is there for you 24/7, and you can have one of our master's level trained clinicians help you sort of put together such a conversation too. You can practice with them even to help yourself feel more confident about what you're doing. So please know that you're not on your own, only on your own here. We are there to help you with this process as well. And number 10 would be, reach out for support. And we hope you, again, would reach out to us, the 800 number. And by all means, see a doctor. What types of doctors here as we move toward the end here? What types of doctors? So specialists can include this list here. I won't go through them, but I will say this too, and sometimes it's, I don't know, I feel a little bad saying it, but just to be transparent, but not every doctor out there knows a whole lot about Alzheimer's or dementia. That's been my personal experience, and I've heard the same from others. So if you're not sure whether you're the doctor or even the neurologist would probably know, obviously, but if whoever you're seeing, if you're not sure if they're knowledgeable, if you still have questions, please reach out to us via that helpline, and we can help connect you with somebody who knows the disease better and can get you a diagnosis, okay? All right. I think what we'll do next is look at, let's see, the benefits of early detection. I think we talked about those already. Sorry, Ruth, I just want to be sure we have time. Okay. So I will say here, so again, paying attention to any changes in memory, thinking, or behavior that you notice in people, very important. If you see changes that are unusual for that person, again, for that person, you know them, okay? Take action by having the conversations, and we know it can be difficult. We've got some guides here that we can use. And the benefits to early detection do include the opportunity to plan for one's future or speak into what somebody would want. Wouldn't you want that? I'd certainly want that, absolutely. So the earlier we can get a diagnosis, the better. We can remain independent longer. And the other really big and important reason for early diagnosis is that what if it's not that? What if it's not Alzheimer's or another dementia? What if it's something else? That happens, absolutely. So please keep that in mind. Okay. Seeking a diagnosis. So let's do, test your knowledge. It's time for a test. There we go. True or false? Let's see, 50. There's currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. True or false? That is false, okay? It used to be said that it had to be I almost said postpartum, that's not what I mean, during autopsy after someone had passed away. No longer is that the case. Individuals, really today can diagnose with a relatively high degree of certainty based on a number of factors. What they're hearing from the family, for example, in the way of behavior and things, the tests, the cognitive assessments that are being done, and also various brain scans. We can talk about the process in terms of what that looks like, but really, again, today we can diagnose people with a high degree of certainty as to having Alzheimer's or another dementia. This particular slide is a little bit small, but assessments may include these things. Sometimes they're in a little bit different order. I will say typically the medical field does not start with a brain scan. Why? Cha-ching, right, okay. But maybe equally important is because really what the process of getting a diagnosis is really like a process of elimination. They're wanting to rule out things like depression, hypothyroid, those mixed medication, the effects of mixed medications and such, okay? So medical history, they'll look at that. Physical exam, screening for depression, interview with close companion. There it is. Those notes, they come right in, okay? And tests can include, obviously, lab tests, a variety of lab tests, urine tests, blood tests, certainly. Mental cognitive status tests. Sometimes you hear them refer to mini-cogs, mini cognitive assessments, okay? Brain imaging. And more commonly, this has been more common in Europe, but it is also, we're seeing it a little more over here, is the cerebrospinal fluid analysis. Is another way to determine, okay? All right. And let's move forward here. We talked about that, I think, too. We'll catch up with the family here. So appointments have been going okay. Mom's handling them all right. Think it's really dementia. Guess we won't know till we get a diagnosis, but let's ask Dr. Salloway if it could be anything else. So he'll drive home that point as well here.
Someone could have high blood pressure that's out of control, or they might have a thyroid condition that's not regulated, or diabetes that's not right, or on a medication that actually can cause memory loss.
Yep.
Drinking too much alcohol can make memory worse. So there are a lot of factors that go into cognitive difficulty with aging that some of them can be remedied. And so we want to do everything we can to improve cognitive ability and quality of life.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll skip ahead here. All right. So what's next when the diagnosis is Alzheimer's? So this family, the Garcia family, does get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, okay? But what do we do now? And again, I know exactly what that feels like because my family left the neurologist's office and had gotten a vascular dementia diagnosis, which is also very, very serious. And literally, they didn't know anything to tell us. You just go home and try to figure it out by yourself. Man, I wish I'd known about the association. It would have made things, a difficult journey, I often say, a little bit easier, okay? We're in pretty much every state there, and here are the resources I do want to, if it's a reminder from last time, great. If it's new to you, just know that they exist, okay? And the 24/7 helpline number is there. It's usually printed on all of our materials. It's on the bottom of the 2-sheet. You'll see it everywhere, okay? You do not have to have a crisis or an emergency to use that number. Just call, okay? ALZ.org is our national website. We also have a Orange County website if you want to see about classes coming up, support groups, various events and whatnot. You just do ALZ.org/OC for Orange County, okay? And in communities nationwide, we have something that's called the Community Resource Finder, or CRF, and that enables you, or it's in conjunction with AARP, and it enables you, anybody, to go onto the site and maybe find, maybe you're looking for an elder law attorney. It'll sort by zip code. It'll give you access to this information all around the United States if you have a loved one in another state. It can also do in-home care providers, so much more, programs, events, everything. At your fingertips, literally, okay?
When I went
I've been
All right, and we want to hear from them, but more important, I think, will be questions. So I'm going to leave these up right here for you to take note of and see if you have any questions. About 10 minutes. Don't be shy. Yes, please. Okay. Please. Great. Mm-hmm. Also, that's very true. Yep. Yes. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Urinary tract infections, absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sure. I'm sorry? Are you able to restate it a little more loudly, perhaps? Yeah. Yeah. Signs. Mm. Mm-hmm. It really should be mentioned here, but it really is a long list, but that's a really a relatively common one that is important to mention, so I thanked her for including that along with our what can be another, mimics the same signs as Alzheimer's. It can, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Did you guys hear the question? So if she's saying basically, so let's say you have Alzheimer's disease, you walk out of the doctor's office with a diagnosis, it's a fatal disease, so what do you do? Right? Any thoughts? What does somebody say? Call the 800 number, absolutely. That's a great starting place, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the points that we talked about in terms of getting an early diagnosis, and I will say this, I am a strong advocate, having seen vascular dementia and Alzheimer's on other family members, there is still a quality of life to be had. For some, the disease can be 20 years, but that can mean 15 years that are pretty good. There is still a quality of life. The person's self, their sense of self, remains through the disease. And I will contend that that is the case and advocate for the value of life with Alzheimer's. And you can still live well, planning for the future. as with other diseases. And I think, as the other young lady at your table mentioned, there are now some medications, some treatments that are affecting the underlying disease itself. I say sign up for a clinical trial, too. You get access to some great medical care. You can get paid in some, but you really could benefit from some of the medications that are involved in clinical trials. We had that experience as well, so I think there are quite a few options, actually. It is a fatal disease, but again, each person, the two greatest barriers to a cure are not having enough people in clinical trials and not having enough funding for them. So I think to be able to contribute to that and making a difference for others would be quite something to accomplish as well. Yeah. Other thoughts? I think there was a question back here too, somewhere. Okay. Any other concerns about that or other conversations? Yeah, please. It depends on the trial. It depends on the trial. The association has something I will tell you called Trial Match. It's free, and you just provide your name, zip code, and an email address. I sign up. I always say I never do ask people to do something I wouldn't do. And a couple of times a year, they will inform you of clinical trials going on in your area based on your zip code. You are never obligated to participate. You get to read about them and decide if you want to reach out. So not all clinical trials do you wait that long. It generally is a very positive experience for many people, and again, I say that from personal experience. Yes. Any other comments? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. I would say it's beneficial for both. To know about this information, to know about the opportunities that we were just talking about too, that still can be had in life for someone with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Does that answer your question? Is that kind of where you were going? Okay. It sounds like, and that may be doubtful. That may be hard to believe. I think, especially when we come from, I think, a culture and a history really where, we've seen Ronald Reagan, we've seen, who else? Glenn Campbell, lots of famous people, if you will, with the disease, and it's a difficult one. But again, keep in mind that it's not what it was in the sense of where we're at with research, and it's an era of hope. And I don't say that; clinical researchers say that. There were events that I've attended, so there's a lot more hope. And if you believe in the value of life, there is also a value of life for those who have the disease. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. There are about 3 currently, aducanumab, lecanemab, and donanemab. They're all mAbs, if you will. Relatively new. The first one arrived about a year and a half ago, and it really was the first in history to actually, again, affect or touch the underlying disease itself. Some of the protein deposits, the plaques and tangles in the brain, they're seeing positive reaction or positive response there. In early stage of the disease, purely right now, but again, it could be very, very beneficial for some in the early stage of the disease. When I first started presenting programs about six years ago, I could not say that. There was no treatment available that touched the disease. None. Only treatments that assisted with behavior, with sleeping, with yeah, behavior, sleep patterns, things like that, sleep quality, I should say. But today, we're able to say that there are treatments available, new, they are new, but my goodness, what an era of hope. And if you're not sure about that, or if you want to hear more about the hope that is available today, a couple of times a year we do what are called research updates, and we usually have Dr. Heather Snyder or one of these, Dr. Maria Carrillo is the Chief Science Officer at the Association. She'll do them as well, and it's amazing what we hear, okay? So I will invite you to those too and share that information so you can get in on the information, okay? All right. Anything else? I want to honor your time. It's almost 8, so it's a cold evening, but nothing else? Please remember that we're here for you. We always say, and I mean it, I hope you'll never need us. I hope that. We know that, it's the 3rd leading cause of death in California, 6th leading cause of death in the United States. We're looking forward to releasing our 2023 facts and figures next month. I'm curious to see if anything's changed. But there is also a facts and figures sheet that you will be able to access for each state in the United States, as well as the nationwide figures, so that's something I would look forward to sharing with you. But no, we're always here for you. We care and understand the disease and want to help however we can, okay? All right. Well, thank you for inviting us to present here, and it can be a difficult topic, certainly, so thank you so very much. And I hope we can do a little bit more in the future, right? Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. I can tell you it will not be me, but I'm moving to the Austin, Texas chapter. Anyway, but I know we've got wonderful, my colleagues at the Orange County chapter, Michelle and Umberto, or we've got wonderful, wonderful, very experienced volunteers who've been through the disease themselves or are studying research, in fact. So, yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes, there are 2 different types of genes involved, although the greatest risk factor is age, keep in mind, believe it or not, that is the greatest risk factor. But there are 2 types of genes, the deterministic gene and the what's called the, oh my gosh, I just lost the word, the risk gene, risk gene, okay? Yeah. So if one is found to have the deterministic gene, which is relatively, it's quite uncommon for later life Alzheimer's, it does determine that one will get the disease. That's why they call it the deterministic gene, right? Again, relatively rare, please keep that in mind. The risk gene, more common, but it only puts one at greater risk. It does not guarantee, it does not determine. And so that's where I say, too, I've got some, I think 10 ways to love your brain bookmarks. I brought those at the table back there so that you can know what things we know we can do based on what's called the U.S. Pointer Study to reduce our risk of cognitive decline as we age. More research is going on in that area too, so more help and hope to come, okay? I will, if you'd like one of the 10 warning signs bookmarks, I've got them here, and I'm happy to, I'll leave them at the back table maybe, okay? All right, thanks, and everybody stay warm out there, right? It's pretty cold, so. And thank you, Chris. Well, thank you for your excellent help, always, you're wonderful. They're blessed to have you. I'll turn it off here.